Good evening. Welcome to the Asheville City Council meeting. If you could just take a moment and silence your cell phones. Always good to. And please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Whose cell phone's on?
This evening, we have one proclamation on our agenda, and it is a proclamation honoring Mary Jacqueline Waters Colton. And we have some honored guests here with us tonight. Liz Colton, her daughter, and Mary Colton Woodward, her another daughter, and her husband, Dave Woodward. And if you have anyone else, please come forward, and I'll meet you down there, and we'll proceed with this proclamation. You can stand right. This is our proclamation microphone. I want to thank you very much for coming down here tonight and allowing us to honor your mother. This is a very special opportunity for us. And we have a proclamation in her honor, which I also delivered Saturday night at an event that she hopefully would have appreciated, I think. An event of one political party. Whereas, on behalf of the city of Asheville, we extend our sincere condolences over the passing of Mary Jacqueline Waters Colton, who passed away peacefully Tuesday, September 25th, at her home in Asheville. And whereas Mary Colton was a dedicated local community, state, and national civic leader, legislator, international diplomat, wife, mother, friend, and mentor to many all over the world. And whereas Mary Colton lived a fulfilling life. She lived and served in North Carolina and traveled extensively abroad. During World War II, she served as a codebreaker translator with the U.S. Army Signal Corps in Virginia, Washington, D.C., and later on, various U.S. naval bases. And whereas Mary Colton was first elected to the North Carolina House of Representatives in 1978, and was later elected the first female Speaker Pro Tem in the North Carolina General Assembly in 1991. She served as a North Carolina delegate to the National Democratic Convention in New York City in 1992. And whereas during her 16 consecutive years tenure, she worked to promote women's and children's issues, health, education, the environment, conservation, historic preservation, arts, tax reform, and many other initiatives. And whereas after her retirement from the North Carolina General Assembly, Mary Colton served on the National Governing Board of Common Cause. She was appointed by the White House and State Department to serve at a session of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women in New York City, and also as a U.S. observer to the 1994 session of UNESCO in Paris, France. And whereas Mary Colton had many accomplishments, earning her several award highlights, including the 2018 Service Award presented to her by the Martin Luther King Jr. Association of Asheville and Buncombe County, and the Order of the Longleaf Pine, among the highest awards in North Carolina, presented to her by Governor Roy Cooper in April 2018. Now therefore I, Esther Manheimer, Mayor of the City of Asheville, do hereby bestow exceptional memorial recognition and proclaim October 9th, 2018, a day to recognize Mary Jacqueline Waters Colton in Asheville and encourage all citizens to take part in celebrating her accomplished life.
Esther, you're going to give us to her?
Okay, next on our agenda is the consent agenda. And if there's any questions, comments, or anyone wants to consider any of the items separately, I know Julie has a comment to make about one of the items, and Kathy was going to provide some clarifying information on another. So Julie, why don't we start with you?
Sure. In our ongoing effort to advance good bike and pedestrian infrastructure and safety, I just wanted to call out a couple of projects that are on the consent agenda. The first is item D, which is this would indicate City Council support for a tactical urbanism problem along Cox Avenue. And Asheville on Bikes' Mike Sewell is here. I don't know if you're planning on talking about it, but it's a great project. It's been through several of our committees, and this is a new thing for us here in Asheville. And again, maybe Mike can talk a little bit about what tactical urbanism is, but it's a great strategy that's been used in other communities to try things out before we invest hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars in fixing things. So I'm personally very excited about it. I think it's going to be great. The second thing is item G, and that is establishing the Vision Zero task force to help reduce the number of traffic-related fatalities and injuries occurring in Asheville. So people may know that for the last several years we have been number one in the state in the number, I think it's the per capita rate of pedestrian crashes, and that is a list that we do not need to be on the top of. And we're not anymore. We're now number 2 this year. Yay. That's also still not a great place to be. So we just need to be off of that list. We need to be way down at the bottom. We can be, and I'm happy that the staff and the Multimodal Transportation Commission and other advocacy groups have come together to form this task force. I think it's the first step in the right direction to really making our city safer for everyone, for those who ride bikes, for those who walk, and for those who drive cars. So I just wanted to flag those two.
Great. Okay, and Kathy.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, I wanted to provide some context around item number E. We've had a couple of questions. That is a change order to increase engineering design services with CDM Smith. On August the 11th, I provided you all with a memorandum following the information that we received about Mr. Wiseman working with CDM Smith and our interactions at all with Mr. Wiseman. CDM Smith has approximately 5,000 employees. The City of Asheville has not had any interaction with Mr. Wiseman when he worked for CDM Smith. The work that we're proposing for you did not include any work with Mr. Wiseman. We have been able to work with them successfully and have procured their services according to state statutes in doing so. I just wanted to clarify that.
Helpful. We did receive one question about that from the public, so that was a good clarification. Any other questions or comments about items on the consent agenda or a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, I have a motion to approve the consent agenda and a second. Is there anyone wishing to comment on the motion to approve the consent agenda? Yes, ma'am. You'll state your name and you have 3 minutes to speak. Yes, Cheyenne. I can't get this fixed. Is it too far? Okay.
I'm Jan Howard Cubanek. I live at 5 Reservoir Road in the Kenilworth community, and I just wanted to point out item E. I think it was E. Well, where Reservoir Road is involved, where you're putting the State Highway Patrol, telecommunications up there. As I've been a 40-year resident of that road, I just want to make you aware of the fact that it's a 1-lane, very bad, narrow, 3-way blind road, and you keep putting more traffic on it. I just wanted you to be aware of that.
This is item C, and I think you're talking about the communications tower that's at the top of the road.
It's in Midway. It's at 130,
above.
166. Yeah, and I know the cell towers are there, and they're in perpetuity. And I think it's great. The State Highway Patrol will be up there, but they'll just send IT. They won't send Highway Patrol. But I just wanted to make an adjoining comment because I still live on that road and will live on that road. And that road does not handle the traffic that it has now. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Madam Mayor, members of council, my name is George Webb. I live at 7 Dearborn Street. I'm here to speak on item G, the Vision Zero Task Force, and to speak in favor and support of establishing such a task force. I'm also here to introduce myself. I'm a resident of yours for all of 6 weeks. I'm a 40-year transportation engineer, and I would like to have consideration for potential membership on the committee. I've reached out to your multimodal commission chairman, and he commented that while there's been a lot of groups that were considered for potential membership, he also felt that there should be an opportunity for unaffiliated people to be able to serve. I've not been able to affiliate myself with any of the groups that so far have been mentioned as members. So the resolution itself is wide open, does not seem to have any, but the backup that accompanies the resolution does seem to have some specifics as far as potential memberships. I'd just like to make sure that was clarified and understood, that the direction to the city manager was that it was to be, open in a staff determination to bring recommendations back to council. So the second thing I'd like to do, and Councilwoman Mayfield mentioned it, it was interesting for me to watch the press coverage about the DOT rankings of Asheville as far as the recent 2016 study. And I just want to make sure you all are aware, and Councilwoman Mayfield specifically stated, you're doing it on per capita. The DOT rankings of cities are based purely on population with a bunch of other statistics thrown in. But that's very different than counties. They do that on million vehicle miles traveled. So all the visitors that come to Asheville and all the driving that gets done in Asheville by those people are not reflective of your position as far as where that stands as far as the report should be. I don't know why the DOT has chosen to rank cities different from counties in ranking their roads, but they did. Thus, you're going to be tough to move off that position as far as that's concerned. So thank you, and I look forward to being a productive Asheville resident. Appreciate it.
Thank you and welcome. That is an interesting question. So the resolution is open-ended in terms it just directs the city manager to form the task force without specific criteria as to the seats on the task force. So I would assume that would be the controlling document in terms of the makeup.
Yes, the staff report does list some recommendations from different bodies, but yes, it's based on the city manager's or staff's recommendations.
Okay. Any other item? Oh, anyone else wishing to speak on the motion to approve the consent agenda? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. And I should mention, Councilmember Vijay Kapoor is not with us tonight. This was a scheduled absence, so we were prepared for that. All right, we have one presentation tonight, and this is an update on the community EMT program and our interim acting fire chief. Wait.
Chief Bazinski had a sick
Wait,
child.
hold on. You
Wait a
guys
minute.
switched
You're
up
not.
on me. All right.
He had a sick child, so I'm pinch hitting.
Okay. Wow. All right. Very
Barry
good.
Henry, Assistant Fire Chief.
The interim acting.
Congratulations. You know how to operate the PowerPoint. You've already passed the first critical test.
All right. We'll call it a success. Mayor, council members, I wanted to take a few minutes and discuss what we've learned thus far with our community EMT program. Our goals as we began the program and as it was developed was to enhance public safety in the Central Business District, South Slope areas, to build further relationships with the folks that are downtown, visitors, business owners, really everyone that is there. Improve patient outcomes for medical emergencies in that specific area for folks that may have medical issues, engaging with community members, particularly some of our more vulnerable community members. We wanted to gather a lot of information, try to get as much information as we could about what we're doing, or the successes, the outcomes, and that will help us drive further decisions. And lastly, we wanted to gather data for the fire department's pre-planning software, First Do Size Up. It allows us to really know a lot of information about the buildings that we may be entering when under very adverse conditions, fires, and things of that nature. So those were our goals, and we've to accomplish that, we set out with putting out two-person teams. Was kind of the first model of how we felt like this would work. And so we put out two riders, two teams at a time. We've operated primarily Wednesday through Sundays. It has been our days. When we began, we were really kind of guessing what would be the best times to have the best interactions and most impact. We began at a 4 to midnight was the hours that we initially began. What we quickly learned was the feedback from our riders and our firefighters that were out interacting, and the community that we needed to get out a little earlier. So we've modified that now, and we're putting one team out at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and then the other team will begin at 4 p.m. and still maintaining that coverage until about midnight. We've been able to have them in service probably 18 days now. We were able to operate several days this past weekend. We've been tracking interactions, and both teams have an iPad with a real quick app that they can drop a pin and show where they've had interactions in the prescribed area and what kind of interactions those were. We've broken them down into 4 main categories: assistance, they're lost and they're trying to figure out how to find something. They need something. Those kinds of everyday interactions that our firefighters have a lot of right out front of our fire station. Primarily, 62% of those interactions have been outreach, and that has been our firefighters engaging with folks that maybe you're sitting on a park bench, just been sitting there for a couple of hours. They've seen them a couple of times. Stop, ask them if they're okay. Hey, what can we do to help you? Those just really looking to establish relationships, we've had some interactions with business owners. That's probably the area that where we realized that we needed to change that, and obviously getting the teams out earlier. We've had some, concerned members of the public. Really, probably the primary one that comes to mind is we had a team was out one Friday evening. I don't know if she's a resident or tourist, someone downtown. She flagged him down, said, "Hey, there's a couple of guys that sound like they're getting ready to fight down the street." They were able to notify APD. It was resolved very, very much as we would want it to. This is the primary area that we began with, and you can kind of see that's where they've dropped pins, where they've had interactions. Again, some of the things that we learned very quickly as we began and as this program moved on was that everything is very relational. The relationships that we're building with both business owners and vulnerable populations is very important. So we've kind of changed that response area. We've expanded it further down Haywood Street and further west down Patton Avenue, so that we have a little bigger area that we're going to be responding and working within. The guys that have been riding for us, that have been out interacting, our firefighters, have really came back with a lot of neat stories, and we've seen that relational importance. One of the best ones we've heard thus far was one of the guys that he had ridden 3 or 4 nights. Someone that he had spoken with a couple of times over the course of his duties flagged him down and said, "Hey, I found this stuff," and it was someone from out of town's credit cards and ID and all that, and he just he gave it to our firefighter to make sure that it got passed along. So that relationship building is a huge key for what we're after. one of the things that we've asked our firefighters to do every night is when they come in is we do an after action and we ask them what went well, what didn't go well, and what can we change, what can we do better. And we're getting that feedback every time we send crews out, and that's allowing us to continue to make tweaks to it as we continue moving forward. Overall cost thus far, about $7,000 of overtime expense for firefighters. How we're staffing it currently is firefighters are volunteering to work extra hours. So it's in addition to service. It's not impacting the core services that we provide daily. About $5,000 worth of equipment to buy bikes and some additional EMS equipment, some uniforms to help identify that they're firefighters and what they're doing out on the street. This is just a snip of a resource card. We have that card that has that information. On the other side, it has a lot of, we talked to a lot of stakeholders as we were developing the program, and so that we can really kind of funnel folks to the resources they need. If it's someone that has a particular need, we've got a lot of information on the other side of the card that says that this shelter has this available to you, or there's medical programs here or there, things of that nature. So really our focus has been on really connecting those with the resources they need as we move forward. Challenges, as with anything new, there's always challenges. The biggest challenge that we've had thus far has been the consistent staffing. Because of that relational piece, having the same people do it regularly, we found is very important, and that's difficult when it's in addition to duty. So everyone has lots of commitments, so that's made it a little bit of a challenge. In addition to that, we've had during the time that we've been operating the pilot program, we had obviously Hurricane Florence. We had at one point greater than 24 firefighters deployed to other responsibilities, so that took away those that were available for staffing. We also have been staffing an extra engine company at UNC Asheville since late August, and so all of those things have kind of been a part of the staffing challenges. Inclement weather. Obviously, we've had a few bad weekends where it's been rainy and we haven't put folks out. So those are kind of the challenges. I think we've had a lot of successes. We've been able to really meet with a lot of stakeholders along the way and develop relationships with those groups as well. So with that, I'll answer any questions if council has anything.
Just a couple of points of clarification, if you could help me. You mentioned how do the firefighters get around downtown? Are they walking? Tell us about that.
They're on bicycles. They're on bikes with carrying EMS equipment, AED, Narcan. So they're equipped. Not like a fire truck, but they have a good complement of EMS equipment.
That'd be a hell of a bike.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty big anyway. That's one reason we can't find people to ride them. So it's just too big.
So is there a sense yet of whether you're putting out 2 at 2 o'clock and then another pair at 4, and so they're overlapping a little bit?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and is that feeling like the right number, or are you all feeling like maybe 6 or 8 might be?
I think right now we feel pretty good with that.
Okay.
I think that if we were to expand our area of response significantly larger, that it would definitely take more. I mean, obviously our terrain is a challenge. Riding a bike from the bottom of Cox Avenue back up to Pritchard Park. There's some of these guys that are much younger than I and can really do a great job, but it's hard, and they're carrying 20 or 30 pounds of equipment on those bikes. But right now I think we're at a good spot.
And you mentioned the costs. Kathy, maybe you could talk a little bit about the cost sharing we've had on this program that hasn't all been paid by the city?
So far, we have gotten a $5,000 commitment from the Tourism Development Authority that has paid for the equipment. The staffing, the $7,000 has come from overtime funding.
From the city? Okay.
And how much did we allocate initially for this?
50,000.
50. So we can continue this for a while.
Yeah, we're technically piloting it right
Right.
now and trying to feel
That's
out
correct.
the.
I just couldn't remember how long the pilot was.
We
It was
have,
like 3 months.
our initial plans have been to pilot it through the end of October. But obviously, whatever you guys tell us to do, as far as that, then we'll continue to find ways to make it better.
And I would note, in designing the program, I know staff did a good job of reaching out to our community partners, such as Be Loved and other groups that work with our homeless population specifically, in designing this. I have mentioned it to several business owners who are business operators who are yet unaware of it. So hopefully with the 2 and the 4 o'clock, you'll have an opportunity to introduce yourself
Sure.
to folks downtown, so they understand that this is a resource we're trying to use.
Absolutely, and you know, like I said, we're definitely trying to get them out on the street as early as we can. We had a very productive meeting with Beloved and with their street medic program. A lot of good feedback, and probably some areas of collaboration that we can support them as well. So I think it's really moving in many positive ways.
Okay, and just finally, I mean, I personally would like to compliment the staff on being creative about this. We don't know of another city doing it. So we're, this is a pilot. We're just trying it out to see what works. So that's really exciting.
Thank you. We've got a lot of good folks that come up with the ideas. We're just happy to keep them all pointed in the same direction some days. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we don't have any other presentations for this evening. We have 4 public hearing items. The first are both street closures, and I've got down here that Chad Bandy is going to present these. The first is a public hearing to permanently close an unopened right-of-way known as Smathers Lane. I don't know if whoever is doing it, if you want to present these together. No.
Assistant Chad.
Yeah, you guys are, okay,
Yeah.
Maggie, forget my notes on here. This is not.
Swapping out staff.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, Greg Schuler, Public Works Director. Chad couldn't make it this evening, so I'm going to try my best
His
to fill
kid's
in.
sick too. Just-
Are you also the interim streets person?
Yes, I'll do my best with that as well. So the first of 2 that I have for your consideration in the public hearing phase to permanently close unopened rights-of-way. The first one I have is,
Sideways,
is that better?
yes.
Smathers Lane, and that is really on the old Volvo property, Duke Energy. This is Klingman, this is Patton, and this is Hilliard. It's unrecognizable in the field that there's an unopened right-of-way there. The staff has communicated with the utility owner, with other members of staff within the city, as well as Multimodal Transportation Commission, and we recommend your consideration to permanently close this unopened right-of-way.
Okay, we'll do this one first because we got to do a public hearing on each of them. Does anyone have any questions first? So this is what the paper right-of-way is, you would
Yes.
say. It shows up on some plat or something, and it's never been opened. It probably went through the parking lot of the old Volvo dealership somehow.
At some point, likely.
Okay. So I'll open the public hearing. If there's anyone wishing to comment on the closure of this right-of-way known as Smathers Lane. Yeah, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Bob Ost. I'm here for the applicant. I don't have a lot to add to what Greg said and what the staff report says, but I'm here to answer any questions if you all have them. I can provide some historical context if you want to.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else wishing to comment on this item? All right, I'll close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
Move to adopt a resolution ordering the permanent closure of an unopened right-of-way known as Smathers Lane.
Okay, I have a second. All right, a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and we have a second, the closure of an unopened right-of-way near the intersection of Hendersonville Road and Sweeten Creek Road.
That's correct, Mayor. This is an unnamed, unopened right-of-way. This is Hendersonville Road, this is Airport Road, Christ School Road, and Sweeten Creek Road. Again, not recognizable in the field that there was ever any such unopened right-of-way there. And again, we have counsel for the applicant here if there's any questions. I'm sorry, staff has, just like the other, consulted with city departments as well as multimodal, and recommendation is to close.
Okay. So anybody, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone wishing to comment?
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Again, I'm Bob Ost. I'm here for the applicant. And I don't have anything to add to what Greg said, what's in the staff report. I would point out, though, that the property is bordered by property owned by two different people. Our client owns this property and this property, but the other property here has joined in the petition. So it's there's no objection to this that I'm aware of.
All right, and the property line will run to the center of the
Yes.
unopened road. Okay. So is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? All right, I'll close the public hearing.
Happy to make a motion.
Yes.
I make a motion that we adopt a resolution ordering the permanent closure of an unopened right-of-way near the intersection of Hendersonville Road and Sweeten Creek Road.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Wherever this came from.
The pencil? Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you. All right, the third item on our agenda is a public hearing to consider the conditional zoning of property located at 28 and 32 Maxwell Street from RM8 residential multifamily medium density district to lodging expansion conditional zone to allow short-term vacation rental use and amendment to the future land use map to change 28 and 32 Maxwell Street from traditional neighborhood to traditional corridor. And before we get started, I'll need a motion to recuse me from this hearing my law firm used to represent Mr. Reed Thompson in regards to this matter long ago, and just to make sure that we don't have any question about conflict. Not me, but another one, my friend.
I'll make a motion to recuse the mayor and the vice mayor to take over in this instance.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, someone come find me. Yes.
Thank you. I'm not changing seats.
Oh, okay.
Thanks. Jessica. All right. Bernstein, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, members of the council, members of the public. This is a request for conditional zoning from RM8 to lodging expansion, conditional zoning to allow for lodging uses in a residential zoning district. The project site can be seen here. It consists of two separate parcels. They're located at 28 and 32 Maxwell Street. This is at the edge of the 5 Points neighborhood. As you can see, adjacent zoning on either side to the east and west as well as the north is also RM8. And then there's CB2 zoning directly across the street as you head towards downtown to the south. There's existing single-family type structures on each property built around 1920, similar to the residential layout, that typical historical residential neighborhood development pattern that extends throughout the neighborhood to the north and 5 Points and a lot of the neighborhoods that are directly surrounding the central business district. According to the applicant, 28 Maxwell, which is this property, is currently 3 separate one-bedroom units, and 32 Maxwell is 1 unit currently. So this zoning map shows what is being requested. The applicant was requesting the lodging conditional zoning. This shows the other zoning in the vicinity. Here's Maxwell Street, Monroe. Broadway is just off the map. This image shows that existing condition that I was talking about, where the two residential structures. So this proposal would be to rezone the use to allow for the short-term vacation rental lodging use, as well as to expand 32 Maxwell. The applicant has requested to have a maximum of 3 units within that structure as well. I mentioned there's currently 1. That increase in density is greater than what the underlying RM zoning would allow. But primarily the request is for that lodging use, and that would result in a maximum of 6 units across the 2 properties. After the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, the applicant has agreed that 1 of the 6 units would be dedicated for long-term residential use, and the other 5 units that he is requesting, he would like to have the flexibility for those to be long-term residential, but primarily short-term vacation rental. The zoning is required since the short-term vacation rental lodging use is only allowed now in that lodging expansion district or resort. So, previously, before January of this year, lodging uses were permitted in any commercial district where that use was allowed, but the effort was made to prohibit lodging uses from all of those other commercial districts where they previously were permitted, and only allow that, and when an applicant is requesting this use, that they have to request lodging expansion. You've seen a number of requests come through for lodging expansion. Those have all been for more typical hotel uses. This is the first that has come across for the short-term vacation rental use. The applicant's proposing to keep the properties primarily as is, in the current configuration with little physical change to the site. But due to the standards and requirements that are in that lodging expansion district that you've seen as we've come through with the other applications, there's a number of standards that applicants are required to comply with, and that has resulted in a long list of conditions that are being requested by the applicant that are detailed in the staff report. Some of them have to do with just the historic development pattern that I mentioned, the existing conditions on the site, the lot size, lot width, setback. Those are all non-compliant with the lodging expansion due to the reuse of the existing structure. Landscaping is a requirement in this district. When a lodging use is proposed adjacent to residential zoning, they're required to put in place a type B 30-foot landscape buffer. There's not sufficient space on the site to do that. After the Planning and Zoning Commission discussion, the applicant is proposing to put in a partial 5-foot buffer where possible. Open space is another requirement for all lodging uses. 15% of the lot area is required to be dedicated for open space. It does appear that the standard can be met currently if the backyards of the lots remain as is. But that would preclude the applicant from having the ability to expand the structures in the future. If he was to expand the structures or try to develop the site further with an accessory structure of some kind, that would be in that required open space area, and then could potentially be out of compliance with that open space standard. So the applicant has not agreed to this condition to restrict expansion of the structures or future development. So that open space condition is not in place. Parking and loading is another one. For lodging uses, guest drop-off is not permitted from the primary access corridor, because these are typical residential structures where you pull up to the front of the house. That's where the lodging or where the guest access is. The other one has to do with parking. So we do require lodging uses to provide off-street parking, and due to, as I've mentioned several times, the existing conditions, there's just not sufficient space to provide that required off-street parking. There is a narrow driveway that runs between the 2 properties, and so the applicant has indicated that the 2 kind of first in, last out spaces could be accommodated in that driveway. It doesn't meet the minimum or the number of spaces that are required. What the applicant has proposed is that guests would be permitted to park on the street. Maxwell Street is, as you may have seen in the staff report, uses a policy that was put in place for residential parking. Many years ago, due to the commercial users of the grocery store or other commercial uses in the site, in the vicinity, folks were coming and parking on Maxwell Street, Monroe, Marcellus, and that was a negative impact to the long-term residential residents there. So the city instituted a policy for hang tags. Each residential unit receives, long-term residential unit receives one hang tag. So the applicant was desiring for his guests to use those hang tags. That's against the policy that's currently in place. Those parking tags are for long-term residential users right now. So the parking, the off-street parking plan is not something that's in compliance with this proposal. A couple of the other ones are a little more minor, like the lot width, lot size that I mentioned, have to do with the existing sidewalk width, some design and operational standards that come into play from reusing the existing residential structures. Another one that I touched on was density. So under RM8, number 32 Maxwell would only be permitted to have that one unit by right that's in the house right now. I mentioned he's requesting to have 3 in that house. Similarly, under lodging expansion, that the zoning district that they're requesting, density standards would apply. A number of rooms is not limited if it's strictly a lodging use, but because the applicant's requested to have that flexibility to allow for the uses to be short-term, vacation rental, or long-term residential, density standards come into place. The standards are exceeded. The maximum would be 20 units per acre without the inclusion of dedicated affordable housing, and the applicant has been unwilling to dedicate any units for long-term affordable housing. So they would only be permitted to have 2 units in number 28 and 1 in number 32. So this is a density exceeding the maximum density. The applicant did hold the neighborhood meetings. That information has been provided. The project was approved with conditions by the TRC. Staff has received neighborhood comment both in support of as well as against the request. Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this proposal at 2 separate meetings. Ultimately, it was supported. The request was supported at their meeting in July, and they're noted there that the residential character of the street has been altered by the proximity to commercial uses. However, the Planning and Zoning Commission members were not in unanimous agreement that short-term vacation rentals was the best and most appropriate use for these sites. One of the commissioners suggested to the applicant at that meeting to do a legal homestay in each house. A number of neighbors who also live on Maxwell Street were present at that meeting and spoke about that a number of them have legal homestays in their properties. So that was brought up to the applicant as a suggested condition by the commissioner, and that was rejected by the applicant. As stated in the staff report, our staff recommendation is not to support this request. The city has taken direct, specific actions in this year and after many years of study to prohibit short-term vacation rental use in almost every zoning district. It's always long been prohibited in residential districts for this whole house or whole unit short-term vacation rental use. So staff cannot support this request. Staff has dedicated, or at council's direction, dedicated increased enforcement efforts towards this prohibition while expanding the use of the legal homestay. The standards that are in place for lodging uses as a CZ are not able to be met by this proposal, as was shown with the number of conditions. Those conditions would be, those standards would be in place to lessen the impact on the adjacent neighbors, and those simply cannot be met. Most notably, as I mentioned, that parking requirement as well as the open space and density. Staff doesn't agree with those conditions. The applicant's agent has stated in several public hearings that the site has been designated in a 2002 Broadway corridor master plan as indicated for mixed use. I believe that may be in his presentation again this evening. The subject properties are actually outside of that study area, so that's just not applicable. The application came in prior to the adoption of the Living Asheville plan, so we were not reviewing the proposal against that plan. We reviewed it against the 2025 plan, which did not support this type of commercial incursion into a residential neighborhood anyway, which is why staff has always responded to requests to erode at the edges of residential neighborhoods. Every time a request has come in to change a zoning away from residential, we look at it very, very carefully, and has not typically been supported. But we do have to use the future land use map in some way, even though it's not being evaluated against that. This rezoning would necessitate a change to the future land use map if you were to approve it. The area, these are the subject properties. It's currently in the land use category noted as traditional neighborhood. So if that was approved, it would have to be changed to something that would permit lodging, which would be traditional corridor. So this would be the proposed future land use map. Staff is not in support of this change to the future land use map. We feel that the area where these houses are, while it's on the very edge of the traditional neighborhood, it really fits with the traditional neighborhood. Traditional corridors are designated along arterials. They're not on these minor local streets. The uses are not the same that are anticipated in traditional corridor as in traditional neighborhood. Traditional neighborhood does anticipate some non-residential uses. We see office uses, office conversions, home occupations, some restaurants, some limited clinics, different non-residential uses may work. But the future land use map does not anticipate lodging uses in this designation, and staff does not support that change.
Jessica, can I just clarify something?
Sure.
So that is the existing land use map that was adopted as part of the new comprehensive plan.
This is the existing.
That is, yeah.
Yes.
So those parcels are not singled out in any particular.
They're not. This yellow is that traditional neighborhood.
Okay.
And then if you were to change it, it would insert a different category. So that's just the blue jutting into the traditional neighborhood.
Thank you.
We've also had information that's been presented by the applicant and his agent at Planning and Zoning Commission about the inability to retain long-term residential tenants. And staff has confirmed with property management companies who manage other properties along Maxwell Street, even immediately adjacent to the Green Life grocery store, that they consistently keep long-term tenants, and the rents are $1,200 and up. So we have not found that to be true for the other properties on the street, even though the applicant has provided information that says that he's not able to retain a long-term tenant. So staff, just in summary, staff is not supportive of this. We do not recommend approval of the rezoning because of the multiple city-adopted goals, the direct actions that have been taken by this board, by City Council, to preserve residential neighborhoods, to increase residential opportunities, and the direct actions to prohibit whole house and whole unit short-term vacation rentals. This use is not permitted in any of the surrounding districts. It's not permitted in the surrounding commercial zoning districts. The applicant's not proposing to mitigate the impact of the proposed use. The density exceeds what is allowed without affordability, and also the applicant's currently under notices of violation for operating illegal short-term vacation rentals on the property. Staff has concerns that approving the use would set a precedent, that this is, after all the work that's put into prohibiting these uses and expanding the use of the homestay, that this is going to legitimize violating the city's goals and the city's ordinances. So that concludes my report, but I am happy to answer any questions.
Does council have any questions of Jessica? We'll hear from the applicant. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I'm going to ask the applicant to come forward, or a representative of the applicant. Please state your name. Just a reminder of the rules for the applicant. You have 10 minutes. On there, the green light will go on when you start your presentation. When you start getting close to the end, it'll turn yellow, and when you need to stop, it'll turn red. So could you just introduce yourself and give us your presentation, please?
Okay, for the record, my name is Joe Minicozy. I represent the applicant Parkway Court and Reed Thompson. I'm going to move fairly fast because we only have 10 minutes for this presentation, and I want to honor and respect that. So first, what needs to be brought into the conversation of this site is its context and what's going on. So we have Mr. Thompson lives on the street, and these are the two houses in question. And just for your edification, he actually has had 3 other houses on the street that he's been forced to sell in this entire process. This actually goes back to about 2004. So here are the 2 properties in the zoning map. Here they are zoomed in. And there's Mr. Thompson's house, to which he still is a resident. Here they are in plan. As you can see from the Google Earth image, you can see trucks on the street in Maxwell Street. This is 28 Maxwell that is currently being used as a 3-unit Airbnb, and this is the house adjacent to it that he'd like to actually just match the neighboring house. Context of Green Life needs to be brought into this. In 2004, Green Life converted a office into a grocery store, and you'll note that there aren't 2 loading bays in this image. There weren't 2 loading bays in the initial site plan, and there was supposed to be a buffer that is acknowledged in this image. The buffer was removed without a public process, and it was added a second loading bay, to which the city removed parking on the street and also forced loading into the street. This is supposed to be screened. This is the law at the bottom. It's not screened. If you want more detail on this, I can give you the full report. This is straight out of the zoning code. This is a buffer. It's between a shopping center and residential. So the intent of the law is to have buffering between residential and commercial. This should be there. The law clearly states that you should have 5 feet of landscaping between the fence and the sidewalk, with trees spaced no more than 8 feet apart to screen 50% of the fence. That's black and white. This is a view from Mr. Thompson's property, one of the applicant sites. This is 28 Maxwell, and this is a shot into the street. Now, granted, this is many years ago. What's notable is that the city has identified that the issue is there because they've actually put visibility triangles in the street, essentially making the street the loading area. Those are supposed to be on the private property, not in the public right-of-way. So there's acknowledgement that the street has become commercialized in the public realm. So for all intent and purposes, the street is the loading area by essentially neglect of the existing rules, which require the street to be residential and protected with those buffering protections. From a non-compliance standpoint, the city, asked Dr. Owens, who's a preeminent expert of zoning law for the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, who literally wrote the book called Land Use Law in North Carolina. In it, he basically cited that the site is non-compliant and doesn't meet the qualifications of what the law is. So he essentially told this body, you have to follow certain requirements. Just to zoom into this, this is, I saw that Bob's back there, but this is Bob's own words, our former city attorney. Oops.
Our code is fairly specific in terms of timelines for complying with respect to notice of violation, and my suggestion is that we just follow that code. So, works for me. That's good. That works for me.
So here you have the city attorney saying there should be a notice of violation delivered to the property. You hear the mayor, Mayor Bellamy, saying that works for me, make it happen. That never happened. So here we are. That was 2006. This is the letter from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where basically read the bottom line that I bolded here, that it should be equal to or better than regular compliance. There should be a 20-foot buffer there or something equal to or better than that for it to be legal. So a notice of violation was never delivered. That was 12 years ago. The city did bring forward in 2007, after the Owens report, we call it the either-or plan, that either Green Life fixes this loading bay, which you see on the left, a buffer added in, or the city moved forward in traffic calm. And that was actually, again, before you all at council. I won't go through all of the notes, but basically Mayor Bellamy said, let's put it in writing, let's make this so. This is all part of the public record. So basically the timeline is the Owens report comes in and your body was made notified of the non-compliance. And you all tried. You did several different times. You asked for Green Life to come back forward. You gave it several different deadlines. And the 2007 is probably the most important one. And this is then interim director Shannon Tuck presenting again before you all. And, you know, here she is showing the drawings, showing the plans. So you can see it all there. You know, this is pretty elaborate. So that was.
No application has been made at this time, but this is very typical of the conditional zoning process, and this is what we would expect to see at this point.
Okay, so that's her saying that. This is some younger guy showing up and complaining. And then this is, I think, pretty germane to the situation. In both cases, oops. Well, and in both cases, sorry. Well, and in both cases,
to the plans that were submitted.
Thank you, and I'm sure there are others great to life about it.
I just wanted, and I also.
So this is Counselor Kate speaking with Mr. Swan. And I've got to hang up, sorry.
Our partners in other places who aren't as committed to our community as you are, and that has been part of the issue for you. Do you feel like you have their support to move this forward?
Yeah, absolutely. We wouldn't have these prints on the table if we didn't have full support of management and ownership of the company.
It's just a question. I mean, I don't want to run into you in 3 weeks and say, what's, you know, I just wanted, and I also wanted to say I know you've been frustrated.
So has it been 3 weeks? And that was 2007. He was supposed to bring plans forward to you all. So there's also issues of the side parking lot that wasn't part of the original plan. I've actually asked the planning department to show me where they got their permit to use this lot without paving it, without meeting the standards. You know, when I first talked to John Swan about this in 2004, I suggested this is a loading area. He said we don't own that property. So somehow they've been using that without a notice of violation or compliance. The city staff even say the city finds that the property and land uses occurring thereon at Green Life are largely in compliance. You can't be largely in compliance. You're legal or you're not. So the city has acknowledged that there is not working. There's nuisance issues. We've been before the noise board. There's frequent noise complaints, frequent sounds, activities and noise disturbances. You all get these emails. 4 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. These are trucks on that street every single day, just ignoring the no truck signs and driving right past them and loading. And it's like shooting fish in a barrel for Mr. Thompson. This is his everyday experience on the street, just woefully ignoring our laws, driving over telephone lines. This was the morning of our P&Z hearing, and this was the week later. You know, this is what the neighbors have to deal with, these beeping of these trucks. This is across the street on the applicant's property. Does this look screened? Is this a nuisance to you all? Would you live with this? Can't walk on the sidewalk. Is that sidewalk blocked? That's a yes or no question. This is from down the street. And even Google Earth spots that truck. You know, it's out there all the time. So, sorry, I know this is kind of funny, but this is, let's see. This is Mr. Mumpower, Councilor Mumpower.
Do that for a week. And you don't get a response, stop calling us.
The reason why Mr. Thompson's been calling you is he was directed by council to do so if he doesn't get responses. You know, Green Life blows their garbage down the street on the Velvet's curb. This is again how they treat their neighbors. They had snow plowed in front of Mr. Thompson's property, and they stopped doing this because Reed's neighbor complained at Green Life. They just do not care about these citizens, and yet you allow them to sponsor that street. This is insulting to that neighborhood. The staff sends us memos saying that they are enforcing the laws that no trucks will block the sidewalk. Does that truck look blocking the sidewalk? You know, this is the law. You can only have the trucks above the line is legal. Everything below it is not. That's a picture. It's really easy to follow. This is illegal. This happens 3 times a week. These are private services delivering on the street. The law only allows for a public contracted garbage truck to operate on the street, and this happens 3 times a week. That is a Class 5 operating beyond a Class 2 zone. This truck here, I went and talked to them. There's a tractor trailer there. I was talking to the truck driver, and you know, city car drove right by and didn't cite that truck with a violation. You know, this is the guy ended up having to load pull the dolly, the trucks down the street. This is Budweiser. This is pretty frequent. The Bud guy is actually pretty infamous on the street for how he treats the street. You know, this is what the neighbors have to deal with. And that's my 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Minicozy. Thank you. Does anyone on City Council have any questions of the applicant? Okay.
Can I address one thing? I know that my 10 minutes is up, but there's, you know, Mr. Thompson was cited for a shrub
Maggie,
violation.
1 minute.
1 minute? Okay. Mr. Thompson was cited for a shrub violation in June for those shrubs going over the sidewalk. You know, this is like the constant enforcement that happens. I've given you letters from all of the neighbors that complain. The last one that's in that packet is a neighbor that complained for $850 a month rent. She would not be willing to pay to live in there. I want to know where this evidence of the $1,200 space is. Even Airbnb people complain. And one last item, it concerns that's the pump truck. The ethical principles of planners, seriously, this is what they have to deal with. The ethical principles of planners say that we have to deal with the interrelated issues. We can't ignore them. That includes you all. Anybody hearing zoning issues have to consider all issues. You can't just neglect across the street. I looked at offices. This is the comp plan from 2025. Why didn't the staff present this to you all? That's the map. The green zone means mixed-use environments. It clearly contemplates a mixed-use environment. And then, just so you know,
Mr. Minicozy?
When we were hearing,
Mr. Minicozy? No.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay. So we're going to questions. So we're going to open this up to public hearing, to public comment. You're limited to come on up, and you're limited to 3 minutes. Please state your name, and then we will limit the entire public comment to 1 hour, and Maggie will keep track of that. And the same rules apply. You've got a green light, says go. When the yellow light turns on, you're getting close. The red light means to stop. So, Mr. Bothwell, you want to come?
Hey, y'all. Cecil Bothwell. I brought this issue up repeatedly over the 8 years I was on council and couldn't get support for making changes here. I'm sorry that Mr. Ost couldn't stay here after his testimony earlier, because Mr. Ost was the city attorney back then, and he and Scott Shuford, who was the planning director at that time, redefined the street, Maxwell Street, as a mixed-use street, a definition which does not occur in the UDO. They defined it as a mixed-use street in order to allow Green Life to use that street for commercial purposes. So, in effect, what they did was they turned a residential street into a commercial street by doing that. Now, obviously, we can't undo that at this point, but it's been my position for many years now that we really need to make this a commercial street. And I don't know the particular definition of what it should be, but it is clearly a residential street. Now, staff says that other renters on that street don't have a problem. Well, look at the map. The two of Reed Thompson's properties are the ones most directly affected by the dumpsters and the noise and the trucks. His are right across from Green Life. Now, maybe other houses down the road there aren't as affected, but we imposed commercial use on this residential street as a city. And it seems to me only fair to make it real and not pretend that it's still a residential area. Yeah, other houses behind that, facing the next street over, are still residential. Yeah, got that. But it's not. You can't possibly even shop at Green Life and not understand that this is a commercial street. And it seems to me only fair to treat it that way. You know, we have really jacked around Mr. Thompson and actually the other owners on this street. I don't know who they are, but we've imposed a zoning, a de facto zoning on them that isn't under the law. Read the UDO. This street is a residential street, according to the UDO. And I don't know how we can continue to impose this on him. And I get that he's been belligerent. I get that he's continued to short-term rental there in opposition to the law, but isn't he right? I mean, isn't he really right that his properties qualify this way? And I really hope y'all will make this change. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Peter Landis, I live downtown. It seems to me that there are 3 steps here that need to be taken. The first is you should deny Mr. Thompson's request because providing a variance to operate short-term rentals would set a terrible precedent. It would encourage potentially countless claims by others who want to do the same, which could flood the council with all of these applications. Second, assuming it's in the council's power, I would drop or suspend the fines because past action or inaction by the city is in great part a result to result of what's happened here. Third, put some pressure on Green Life. I mean, or should I say Whole Foods, as a way out of this mess. My understanding is that all this, the store has not lived up to agreements made years ago regarding its responsibilities. If I'm wrong about that, then the city made a bad deal in the first place. In any case, Green Life is owned by the world's richest person. Let me say that again. He's the world's richest person. We're talking about Jeff Bezos. He's worth $150 billion. You would think that perhaps he, to provide, for the reputation of his company, would be willing perhaps to shed a few $1,000s to try to work up a solution to make this happen. I mean, there is such a thing as public pressure, which I think that this council, this city, could put on Green Life, on Whole Foods, and on Jeff Bezos to come up with a solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Here, someone over.
Do I go?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Meg Jameson. I moved into 17 Maxwell Street in the summer of 2007. I moved out in the spring of 2008. The reason, I couldn't live there. I'm right behind the loading docks. I lived there day in, day out. I was 25. I like to stay up all night, but not day in and day out, okay? So after that, I moved away for some years. I came back after 3 or 4 years away. I came back in 2015, and I realized that this whole Green Life thing is still going on. What a shame. It's so sad to hear that my former neighbors and that Reed is still dealing with this. I was so disappointed to hear that. I'm here to support the request that's at hand today for this use that's being requested. I am evidence that Reed can't keep a tenant. I left. So if people say that you can't find evidence, here it is. And I do encourage council to think about the opportunity that you have here in front of you today. I know this wasn't your all's decision way back when, but the precedent has already been set. And that precedent is choosing large businesses, large corporations, the world's richest person over people, over our residents. And it really breeds distrust in what our community members think that they can do with their property, the advantages the disadvantage they have over our city. They feel powerless. So I really encourage you guys to think about those things, and also encourage you guys to think about maybe 10 or 15 years down the road. What happens? What happens? Reed is bled dry. He has to sell off his houses. Who's going to buy those houses, and who are they going to rent them to? I don't know, because I wouldn't want to live there. I've already tried to live there once. But think about that. The only people that can afford to live in a place where there is constant traffic, there's interruption, there's noise, there's sleepless nights are the poorest in our community. You're putting the poorest in our community in long-term rental solutions where they're completely and constantly faced with nuisances every single day. It's not right. So I encourage you guys to correct this, to do what's right, and to think about the precedent that you're setting by not doing what's right. I also want to just put something out there. I live in the Charlotte Street community, and I know that our neighbors are really nervous right now because the way that the commercial properties have been handled on Green Life and Merriman Avenue have affected their neighborhoods. Everyone's really nervous about that transformation of that property. And I have never heard in my 35 years of life someone say, boy, I think Fuddruckers is starting to look pretty good right now. And the reason that is because they are so distrustful of how laws will be enforced and how their neighborhood is going to be affected. So please, I encourage you to do the right thing and choose our people over large billionaires.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Karen Ramshaw. And 15 years ago, the City of Asheville staff made mistakes. They didn't follow the law, they didn't follow proper process, and they allowed a significant commercial use on Maxwell Street that created severe negative consequences for the neighborhood. You know, we all make mistakes. We then need to own them, and then we need to take steps to correct and to mitigate. But that didn't happen. When Reed Thompson and other Maxwell Street neighbors complained, city staff doubled down and they abused their power to ignore and marginalize this community, and Reed Thompson in particular. There was a 32-page report attached to this agenda item, and I cannot imagine the mental gymnastics required to create that report. Nowhere is there an acknowledgement that this entire problem is a result of staff failing to do their jobs properly 15 years ago and refusing to make things right in the ensuing years. That was not a staff report. That was a snow job. Here's one example. The properties in question are directly across the street from Green Life's ongoing commercial use on Maxwell Street. Two of the arguments were buffering. Reed wasn't going to provide buffering, and there was not going to be street parking. The Green Life Grocery uses its buffer area for unloading. There's no landscaping on the frontage, and there's inadequate parking because Green Life removed parking from the street to put in its loading docks. This is not fair and equitable application of the law. Then, as Joe Manicosi showed, in 2007, acting city council gave Green Life 45 days to mitigate. 2007, 45 days. 11 years have passed. Green Life made no changes. 11 years. The city issued no violations. There has been no enforcement of the law where Green Life is concerned, and Reed receives a citation because his plant is 8 inches over the sidewalk. Mr. Thompson is not asking for special treatment. He'd just like what Green Life's getting. I feel it is past time for council to make things right on Maxwell. In light of the flagrant commercialization that the city has allowed and abetted for 15 years, the very least we could do is allow Mr. Thompson to do short-term rentals in the 2 properties that are most affected by Green Life's activity. And for heaven's sakes, can we drop the fines? I mean, as a taxpayer, I am begging you to quit allowing staff to dig a hole that we will have to pay our way out of. I was in the P&Z meeting and saw the Fuller presentation, and it was embarrassing. There is a long and well-documented trail that is not playing well in court.
Thank you, Karen.
Fix this. Thank you.
Where's the light?
Right in front of you.
Oh, okay.
You're good.
I'm Karen Sickink, and
You can pull it down if you...
was resident on Maxwell Street in 32 Maxwell from August of 2015 to May of 2016. So I was in the house that was directly across from Green Life Grocery. And the noise that you heard from those trucks, I would like to ask any of you, who would want to wake up to that? 5, 6 a.m., practically every morning. I mean, that's no joke. That's what we lived with, that kind of noise. Who's going to pay $1,200 for that? I wouldn't pay half of that. I couldn't stay any longer. I tried to get used to the trucks, but it was just, I just really couldn't believe it. The whole first week I moved in, I could not believe that these people were living on a street that had that kind of truck traffic and that kind of truck noise. So I'm definitely another witness to say that he can't keep tenants there because of the noise of those trucks. And I guess I'm just blown away that he's been fighting this fight for 15 years just to get the trucks off the street so he could have residents live in his homes there. And now when he's trying to do short-term rentals, I mean, how much does that change the life of the street? There's some Airbnb traffic going on versus trucks all day long beep, beep, beeping. And you guys want to fine him for that, and yet go 10 to 15 years without any effort to change that situation on Maxwell Street. I just can't believe it. It just doesn't even seem possible. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I wanted to let you know that you should go over there and sit and 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning and see if you like that noise out your window.
Thank you. Did I see someone over there? Come on up.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Wainscott, and I can't believe that the city could possibly think that this applicant is doing $1 million worth of damage to the city. Well, this guy is doing $1 million worth of damage to the city, engaging in the activity of lodging tourists, which we pay $20 million a year to make sure happens, because lodging tourists is what this town is all about. That's amazing to me that this guy is somehow causing damage. You love the trickle-down effects of tourism. What about all the benefits to the people he has come to his Airbnb and goes out and spends money in this wonderful, prosperous economy that is tourism? He's doing exactly what you're making happen. This is just a simple matter of adapting and evolving. The environment's changed. You can allow a variance. Obviously, this residence is no longer suitable for long-term housing, single-family housing, long-term rental, transient. Even young people don't want to be there. Now, maybe, I mean, there's plenty of hotels stacked right on top of a, interstate and Patton Avenue and all that kind of stuff. That kind of lodging, you kind of can expect those urban noises that you have put on this street. So it's just a matter of evolution. All you have to do is allow this property to adapt to the changes that have happened by the power of your ability to make a variance for this guy. And, unless you really truly think that he's done $1 million worth of damage to you guys. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
Hello, my name is Michael McDonough. I live in Montford, and I walk at least once a week up Maxwell Street to go to Green Life. I remember the building before Green Life moved in, and was excited to see it renovated to a neighborhood use. I was shocked to see a loading dock abutting a neighborhood and thought there's something wrong here, and subsequently learned that there was something wrong there. I'm also here to support zoning. I believe in zoning. I believe it's the most effective tool we have in our toolbox to allow dissimilar uses to live cohesively and compatibly in a neighborhood. But it doesn't always work. And in this case, through I think some mistakes on staff and just the zoning tool itself, it didn't work, and it hasn't worked. And I've watched it day in and day out. I've been on Maxwell Street. I've seen some of the evidence that's been presented, and I am sympathetic to someone having to live across the street from a use like that. I also understand that the tools that you have to enforce in the toolbox is a lodging use, and I understand that it's not a perfect solution to this. You have some issues with spot zoning and incompatibility with parking and stuff like that. Short-term rental, I'm not a big supporter of short-term rental. I don't want to see our neighborhoods eroded by that. But maybe in these friction points between a highly commercial use and a neighborhood, we have to look at other tools, such as potentially short-term rentals or other tools that may not actually be in the UDO right now. I think we have to be flexible. And this is a perfect opportunity for us to look at, one, how do we address short-term rentals? And two, is this friction zone here an opportunity to explore other uses and other solutions and maybe broaden our toolbox kit? Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Madam Vice Mayor, members of council, esteemed staff. I'm Pat Whalen. I'm the president of Public Interest Projects. I've been working in downtown Asheville for close to 30 years. We're taxpayers, and we have no connection with Maxwell Street. We've been doing business and projects here for those years, and we learned many lessons. Two of the most important were to try always to take the high road, and when we make a mistake, admit it and fix it. You didn't cause that problem on Maxwell Street, but you're the ones we elected to fix it. On the 8-page staff report, there's much discussion about landscaping and buffers and protecting residential neighborhoods, but green life isn't mentioned until page 4, and then it's mentioned positively as a neighborhood serving commercial use. There's no mention in the staff report of the elephant in the room that's stampeding back and forth down that street with backup alarms going and diesel engines going. There's no mention of the 15 years of broken promises and ineffectual enforcement. Again, you didn't cause this problem, but you're the ones elected to represent both sides of Maxwell Street. The staff says there is none of the required community benefit in Reed Thompson's request. Isn't there a community benefit in doing the right thing? In making a gesture toward fairness and equity? You ran, I'm sure, to make Asheville a better place, to make Asheville more responsive to its citizens. You won. This is your chance. Do the right thing. Take the high road. Thanks.
Thank you. Please, you can do this, but please don't clap.
My name is William Huxley, and I'm a resident here. I have followed this drama with Green Life for the entirety of the time that Green Life has been in our neighborhood. And let the record show that I have shopped at Green Life and I like Green Life's products, and I believe that it is nice to have good fresh food available. That said, as you may know from previous presentations, or if you too have followed this drama in its long history, the number of violations that Green Life made in their application and becoming a part of the community is by no means limited to traffic issues or their loading dock. Those are just the most egregious ones that are bringing us here today. And there's two thoughts that I'd like to leave you with. One of them is, so what if this was your place? Because I'm a landowner here, and I think most of you may well be landowners or have been in the past. What if this was your place? I mean, do you just sell and hope for the best? Do you try to wear earplugs at night? I mean, let's be honest, this is the kind of thing that would cut you to the core over time. I know it would me. I mean, when a neighbor's dog barks for a little while, I get uptight. We're not talking about dog barking occasionally. I mean, we're talking about like every morning from 3 to 5 or 5 to 6 or 6 to 7. I mean, this just doesn't end. So I recognize, as many people have said, that this is not something that was done under your watch. But as many people have also said, this is something that you have the opportunity to clean up. Now, as far as the short-term rental debate goes, I'm in no position to be making advice about this because I manage short-term rentals. What I would observe is that the lipstick on the pig of giving Reed the opportunity to rent out his places may not end well for Reed either. Because let's be honest, Airbnb users and VRBO users, they leave reviews. And if you go and stay in Greenville to go see a show some night and you get woken up at 5:30 in the morning by a beeping truck 3 times, aren't you going to mention that in your review? That is not a solution that I have a quick answer for, but I think you should observe that if that's all that comes of this debate, he may get poked in the eye one last time. And in closing, as somebody mentioned about Jeff Bezos' ownership of Whole Foods, please consider that for many well-educated, well-meaning citizens, both in Asheville and beyond, one of the most painful and dire realities of life in this era is how the 99% gets stepped on by the 1%. I realize that's kind of a cliche talking point, but we are talking about a large, powerful company at this point, and frankly, even before Jeff Bezos owned Green Life or Whole Foods, and before Whole Foods bought Green Life.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Hope Trammell. I've worked for Reed for about 10 years as a bookkeeper and a cleaner, and I can tell you that he has lost tenants due to the noise. Several tenants have ended their lease early because they could not live with that. And I know that having to go to Maxwell Street to work at Reed's house or clean, nearly every time I go there, I'm impacted by a truck in the road. And there have been times when 28 Maxwell Street's virtually, you cannot access it due to the trucks. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Velvet Hawthorne. I live at 17 Maxwell Street, right next door to Reed. I bought my house from Reed 8 years ago, not really understanding what was going on at the time. I do have to deal with the trucks constantly. I know I've written to most of you about the fact that my fairly brand new 2016 Honda CRV was hit by a tractor trailer and dragged up the street while I was in the shower getting ready to go visit my daughter and son-in-law in San Francisco. Needless to say, it took 3 days for the trucking company's insurance to rent me a car, so I missed out on my trip. But that's not the major issue here. The major issue here is that he cannot continue to have people stay there on 12-month leases. I barely can stand at night, and I have my windows closed and my air conditioning running in my window upstairs. I sleep in the upstairs part of my house. And all I hear is the grease truck coming to suck grease out. And if you've ever heard that at 6 in the morning, it sounds like a monster outside your window. There are constant, just the dirt that the trucks create. I mean, I constantly have to wash my windows and wash my porch down, and my vehicles are covered because of the amount of traffic that comes through there in these big trucks. But I also lost a mature tree on the corner of my yard because numerous tractor trailers try to make the corner turning from Marcellus onto Maxwell, and they've knocked off limbs off my tree. So this summer, to the tune of $700, I had to have that beautiful tree taken down because it died. I don't have a problem with Reed turning those into Airbnbs. I do an Airbnb out of my one bedroom downstairs. We all take very good pride, as the other gentleman said, we do depend on our reviews to get business from customers that come in and stay, that we take a lot of pride in our homes. And I don't believe anyone that runs an Airbnb, at least in my neighborhood, lets it get run down in an eyesore, or do we allow our guests to disturb our neighbors? So I would strongly ask you to consider his request for this rezoning. I personally think that it is something he deserves after putting up with 15 years of this. And as everyone else said, it isn't something that any of you created. Someone allowed this to happen, and all we're asking for is some kind of resolution. I did personally get a phone call from the head of Whole Foods, the vice president of the region, and he was very considerate and kind, and I told him, you know, I would like for him to come and talk to the neighbors about what's going on. But since my vehicle has been hit, I do notice a decrease in the amount of trucks coming through because the store has made a massive effort to try to get these trucking companies to not come down our residential streets. But they still do. And the garbage trucks, and the recycle trucks, and the grease trucks, and on and on. So again, the other issue, if I still have another minute, all right, I don't, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Sidney Bach, and I did not come this evening to address you on this matter. I came to address you on a matter later concerning an important fiscal issue that has come to my attention, and I'll deal with that later. But sitting here, it makes me think that this is also a potential budgetary fiscal matter, because what you have here appears to me to be a potential federal lawsuit involving denial of equal protection of the law under the 14th Amendment, and it would give rise to a lawsuit against anybody who's an official that has deprived the applicant of due process and or of equal protection. And whether he wins or loses, that's going to cost the city. I don't know what you all pay attorneys. It'll be farmed out to either Mr. Bissett's firm, as was the bond issue, or another law firm. and you're looking at spending $150,000 maybe, or $100,000, let's say, of city tax revenues, because we know you're not going to pay for it personally. It's going to be the taxpayers. So what I see here is a potential for a tax hit due to recalcitrant attitudes of the staff. And I end my remarks with simply saying, doesn't the city of Asheville's staff have erasers on their pencils when they make mistakes?
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello. My name is Joshua Camacho. I'm actually a new citizen to Asheville, but I'm just going to make this nice, short, and sweet. I think people are more important than companies, flat out. So if somebody is able to be treated lesser than a company as being a citizen of the United States, I don't think that that's fair. A company is an entity that makes money off of people, where we have people, multiple people have come up and stated how not only is it the richest man who owns this company, but you have tourists who, I mean, our baseball team is called the Tourists. That's why we make money, to bring people in to this beautiful city that I moved to allow them to enjoy it as well. So for a company, for a company to be able to blatantly go against 15 years of, we could say them unlawful actions, I don't think any citizen of Asheville would be able to do that without jail time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone?
Hello, my name is James Judd, and I'm a resident of Asheville. I've been following this and been involved for pretty much all the time, 15 years, trying to provide Reed with some justice. I think people before me have spoken very eloquently, so I'll try to keep it short. One of the things I would be interested in, one of Mr. Minicozy, one of his last slides, he was trying to ask the question of, or at least I would enjoy an answer from staff, is my understanding was that the addition of the 2025 plan, when he provided his application, was changed post that, and that's what the staff is presenting now. I guess I would be interested in why that was not conveyed to the applicant at the time. And in general, I guess I've...
Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is bringing it up there. But yeah, so this was, I don't have much information on that, but hopefully the staff or someone else can respond to that. So in general, I've, 15 years ago to now, it's just been, Mr. Ost, Mr. Shuford, how they responded, how staff responded in the past has been extremely disappointing. I appreciate, I believe it's Jessica Bernstein's presentation today, that she was actually going over facts. And I think, we probably counted 25 different, what they would call administrative exceptions, which are basically violations that were not enforced with Green Life. And she's basically jotted down a bunch of things that she believes are not meeting the code for the current, but I wish they had done that in the past, and I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, Council. I'm Brandy Boggs. Thanks for listening to us here. I want to point out real quick to anybody who's looking, this star right here is not only Reed's property, but it's my property as well. This was when Reed first applied for this application. This was our zoning, which was leaning more towards a commercial corridor. and went to planning and zoning. Planning and zoning kicked it back to take more time to review it without staff discussing it with the applicant, without staff discussing it with planning and zoning or letting any of us know. They changed it to this before it came back to planning and zoning, which is neighborhood corridor, which makes Reed's application harder. Some might say it's personal. That's up to y'all. I'll just go on from there and let you know that I think it's absurd that we're even talking about the new comp plan. It's not being reviewed into that, and that is not fair to do. It's very unprofessional for staff to even bring that up here. I'm a firsthand example of what it's like to live on the street. I also live on the street. I have been there before Green Life as well as with Reed. My front yard became a loading dock. I have lost many long-term renters to the point of 2012 when the recession hit, or late 2010, 2011, I lost my last long-term renter at 4 in the morning with a very long explicit email that he did not want me to show here today. He was so embarrassed at how mad he was from trucks, from loading docks. I've had, between myself and my long-term renters, I've had 14 vehicles. 14 vehicles have been hit by trucks going in and out of Green Life. I've had 2 totaled vehicles from Green Life loading docks, from the commercial traffic. I have lost so many long-term renters. People don't want to pay or they're just complaining, and it's just been such a hassle that I moved to Airbnb in 2012, one of the first people to do it in town. I moved to the back of my house so I could sleep at night and throughout the morning, and made the front of my house. It's now a legal homestay. I'm not a big fan of short-term rentals. I'm a fan of homestays, the way they are now. I'm not a fan of short-term rentals. I don't want to see our communities eroded by these and them being unchecked and unregulated. I also don't want to see my street being unchecked and unregulated. And that's what's happening. And we can talk about Jeff Bezos, we can talk about Green Life, we can talk about Amazon, but the property is owned by the Turner family. I'm not sure why we're not talking about, just to make sure that's State Representative Brian Turner makes money off of this lease from Green Life. That needs to be in the record. That needs to be considered. I'm pretty sure it's been considered, and that might be why we've been treated the way we've been treated.
Can you just address
Well,
council,
I'm letting you
please?
know that we're not stopping when we're talking about Bezos. We're stopping when we're talking about who actually owns the property. Violations go with property owners. I'm a regulator. This is how we do it. So I'll just go on to say,
thank you,
equitable
Randy.
choice is to let us go.
Thank you. You needed to identify that at the beginning to take the 10 minutes, but. Does anyone want to? Mr. Thompson, you yielded your time as the applicant.
Excuse me?
You are the applicant.
So I've done what?
So
I've yielded my time?
That you had your
So
time
then
with the 10 minutes.
Then does Joe have his time?
Joe-
Because Joe's
Joe-
not the applicant?
Joe-
So he can
Joe
give my
represented the
presentation for
applicant.
that? I mean,
The applicant
basically
can
what I
e-
see here is you don't want me to be heard.
The applicant can speak for themselves or have a representative. You had a representative speak in your place as the applicant.
Do I have
Seems to me like
consensus?
you all don't want-
Okay,
don't want
go
the
ahead.
record
Yeah,
made.
go ahead, Mr. Go ahead, Ms.
If we
Thompson.
need to make a motion
So do
to
we wanna-
formally
So do you want
change our
10 minutes?
procedure for this.
That's what I'm asking
Okay,
for.
so I need 2 people who haven't spoken, 3 people who haven't spoken, and then you will yield your time. You won't speak. Okay. So you've got 10 minutes, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you.
That's a deviation from our policy, so I just appreciate your, thank you.
Do we need a
I'm
formal motion
curious
to
as to
do
why
that?
the mayor isn't
No.
here.
She recused herself,
And
and
why
we
did she do
voted on that. Did your time start, Mr. Thompson?
I don't know. I'm
This
just-
isn't a dialogue. You give a presentation, please.
There are rumors out there that I need to give up something. Really? On Maxwell Street, we have lived with 14 years of an illegally operated commercial alley and loading in the street that's been completely unenforced. For 12 years, the city has had a report from the School of Government. So everyone has known it wasn't in compliance.
The microphone a little closer to you.
I've been threatened, I've been assaulted, I've been arrested. I've been banned from public buildings without due process. In 2015, I was removed off a field trip with my daughter because of staff's actions. When we look back at the record, it shows I was banned after I had been promised corrective action by council. All I did was ask staff for the plan to get the trucks off the street that I was promised by council. It's obvious to me now that that was all just misdirection by our government. My neighbors and I have been intimidated from speaking out. I would have had more realtor friends here tonight, but they were afraid to come because they were afraid to be singled out like I've been singled out. I've sold 3 houses. I've dealt with continuous nuisances. One of my tenants went to Europe, and when she returned, the rats had eaten the wiring in her car. She moved out, and I sold the property. Please do the right thing and help mitigate this situation. If I were asking for special treatment, I would be asking for what Green Life got 14 years ago. I put in my application prior to the change in zoning. Shannon Tuck, who was directed to get the commercial traffic off the street a decade ago, is the same person that denied my application. One of 2 that were denied out of 36. Joe Minicozy put in my application. By his peers, he's ranked as one of the top 100 urbanists that have ever lived. He works with governments across the country and around the world. It puzzles me that he was unable to complete an application that was acceptable to Shannon Tuck. In the 32-page report prepared by staff, Green Life is mentioned one time in the minutes from the Planning and Zoning meeting. Planning and Zoning Commission. The published minutes are 7 pages. Quite by accident, I ran into the woman that kept the minutes in a restaurant, and she told me they were 9 pages. I don't imagine staff did me any favors with their edits. I feel like I've been singled out, like I've been treated unfairly by the city for standing up for myself. How can the planning staff say the 2 issues are not related when that's what planning is all about, the interrelatedness of properties? Heck, for the sake of all my neighbors who have been through the same situations I have, I think we ought to rezone the whole street so we can do short-term rentals, because we all need a break. And I want to put this up.
Okay, got it.
But I shot this little panoramic. This was shot a week ago today from my front porch in the morning. If you look over here in this corner, that's my commercial activity. Now tell me, what looks more commercial to you? I've been the buffer to my neighbors for 15 years. I mentioned Shannon Tuck earlier. Let's see. I got my license turned into the real estate commission because I wasn't supposed to. Someone felt like, Don Davies felt like I didn't, let's see, how is this gentleman still able to be a real estate agent in our community? This is after Gary banned me from public buildings. Well, here's what I'd like to show you. Mrs. Tuck said that Mr. Thompson was a known loose cannon in the community. In her opinion, he was not stable. And then it goes on to say, she never felt threatened, nor did she actually see him follow her anywhere. So, I question, how was Shannon ever involved in my case? Here we have a letter from Cecil Bothwell. I had a meeting with Jerry Jackson and Bob Oast this afternoon. When I showed them the letter from the Board of Realtors, they said that the information in the letter was not what Shannon Tuck had told them about the incident. And then, what I noticed was missing from the planning and zoning meeting was the information that I supplied about the Turners. The Turners own the property. Every morning when we're woken up, when I hear that beep, beep, beep from the garbage truck, and I know I've sent you all pictures where my daughter's sitting in the window crying with the truck behind her, I know I've invited all of you to come out and have coffee with me on my porch, and I know none of you have taken me up on it. And I'm sorry that I seem upset, but I've dealt with this for 15 years, and I know that I have not been treated fairly by staff. Because if they can't see the interrelatedness, and what didn't get shown here is, this used to be all part of the Broadway Corridor District. This is Kevin Kerr's building right here. It's 20 units an acre, but you downzoned it so that I can't ask for Airbnb later on my other property. I don't know if that was directed by council or if that was done by staff. The same thing was done to Chris Peterson and to Jim Siemens. And if you look at it, doesn't that look just kind of odd in the middle of all that blue? And I would like to thank
Mr.
everybody
Thompson.
who showed up to support me. Thank you. And I'd like to see a show of hands of people who think I've been treated fairly. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more public comment?
Again, I'm Jan Howard Kubinek. I'm a 40-year resident of Kenilworth. People, this one is Boffo. We all know that you didn't do it. You're not responsible for it. We know that administrations in the past created situations like this. Please, please straighten this one out for him. You've been on that loading dock. You know what it looks like. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Council, anyone?
Close the public hearing?
Oh, right, I'll close the public hearing. Sorry about that. So, anyone want to comment or make a motion?
I would like to comment before a motion.
Okay.
I've been acquainted with Reed prior to my getting elected, but did not know him well and did not know his situation at all. After getting elected and starting to see his emails on a regular basis, I became aware of his situation very quickly and would bring up very often, why can we not do something to make this right for this man? That he has obviously been wronged over the years, and the city has an obligation to do something about that. I came into this meeting tonight not knowing just what that should be, thinking that the short-term rentals may not be the solution here. But after hearing everyone speak tonight and Mr. Minicozzi's presentation, I can't contradict anything that was said tonight. Looking at those two houses now, I wonder that they could be rented for anything other than a short-term rental. I would not want to live there. I would be moving out of there in no time. I enjoy my sleep and not willing to give it up, even to live in a nice location like that. And this is no longer, when you also am familiar with the street, and it truly is not a residential, it doesn't feel like any residential street that I'd want to be living on. It feels like a commercial street. I just wanted to say that I'm going to support the applicant. And though it's been spoke that this sets precedent, well, I don't really think it sets precedent. I think this is a special case. I don't know any other person in the city that this would apply to, and anyone else would still have to come before this committee. And all of us here do not support whole house short-term rentals, but there are special circumstances, and I believe this is one.
Anyone else?
Yeah, a few comments. This is not an easy situation, and I will say that I completely agree with the speaker who said that people are more important than companies. There's no question about that for me. But this, to me, doesn't have anything to do with Green Life. It doesn't have anything to do with the Turner family. I'm not, anything that I bring to this conversation has nothing to do with those entities. The truth of this matter is what everyone has said, which is that decisions that the city made years ago were wrong. It is easy for us to sit here and say that, but because I wasn't here then, I can say it, and I'll say it. It was wrong. And it was wrong that it wasn't fixed in the previous 15 years. It should have been fixed in 2007. It should have been fixed, and it just should have been fixed. And it's a puzzle to me as to why it was not. I do not understand it. Council members seemed intent on fixing it. The owner of Green Life seemed intent on fixing it. The city staff seemed intent on fixing it, and I just cannot understand why it didn't happen. And I am well aware that the city's actions this is my belief, have harmed probably to some degree everybody on that street. Mr. Thompson, I think, has been particularly impacted, and that has caused enormous distress and I think real damage. And just for myself, I will apologize for that. I think it's inexcusable what has befallen him over the course of the last 15 years. So all of that is very troubling to me. And like Brian, since we got elected, I think we have been trying to figure this out. What is the solution? How do we solve this problem? And I don't think we have found it yet. I am equally troubled by the proposal that has come before us, mainly because turning these properties into short-term rentals doesn't solve the problem. The problem is Green Life. The problem is the fact that there is a loading dock where there shouldn't be a loading dock. The problem is that there is a loading dock with no buffer. The problem is there are trucks on that street that shouldn't be on that street. That's the problem, and that's the problem we have to fix. So allowing this, to Brian's point and to the point of another speaker earlier, allowing these houses to be used as short-term rental in complete violation of every direction that this council has gone in terms of that policy doesn't fix the problem, and in fact, might not even work. So and to Cecil's point earlier, turning the street into a commercial street also doesn't solve the problem because short-term rentals are illegal everywhere now. Now, if we had rezoned it commercial a year ago, that might have been an answer, but that's not what happened. That is not where we are today. So what we need to do, in my view, is focus on Green Life and focus on Whole Foods, focus on the richest man in the world, And I am happy to share that those conversations have opened. Our city staff is in conversations already with Whole Foods about them coming to look at this problem and try to find a solution. There have also been other options on the table for resolving this. This is obviously not the first time we've had this conversation with Mr. Thompson. The staff memo references a mediation. There have been a number of options put on the table to try to alleviate the distress that he is experiencing. We have not been able to come to an agreement on any of those things, but I remain convinced that we have to actually solve the problem, which is Whole Foods. And so I have committed to our own staff that I will put energy into trying to do that and to trying to bring pressure to bear there. I will, to the degree that it makes any sense, try to pull the landlords into that conversation to put pressure there. That's where the pressure needs to be. They obviously have the resources to solve this problem, and we need to push them to do that. We need a permanent solution to this problem. And allowing these two houses to be used as short-term rentals is not the permanent solution. It will not fix the problem, and that's where I want to go.
Any other comments or a motion?
I'll make a motion. Before I make the motion, I'll concur. I won't make statements or anything, but I'll concur with exactly what Julie said, as well as Councilmember Haynes. This, in my opinion, won't be the end of this. Truly not. But this is, in my opinion, is not the fix for it. With that said, I will move to deny the conditional zoning request for Parkway Court LLC for 28 and 32 Maxwell Street from residential multifamily high density district to lodging expansion district conditional zone, and find that the request is not consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan, and that the denial is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. Number one, the use is not permitted in the surrounding residential districts, nor in surrounding commercial zoning districts. Lengthy public discussion surrounding the restriction has taken place, resulting in the action by council to prohibit whole house STVR uses and greatly limit the use elsewhere. Number two, due to the historic residential development pattern, there is not sufficient room on the properties to provide the buffering and parking required by code. Number three, on-street parking along Maxwell Street is purposely reserved for long-term residential users. Only is a concerted effort to reduce the impact of commercial users in the vicinity. And number four, in the city's application materials, it is stated that the conditional zoning tool is available to promote land uses and activities that benefit the public in general. If there is only private benefit, the tool should not be used. The action is only for the financial benefit of the applicant. And five, a change in future land use map to traditional corridor is not appropriate, as these properties are more suited to the traditional neighborhood designation, and Maxwell Street would not be identified as a corridor. That is the motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. It's denied, yeah. Right. Okay, maybe someone can go get the mayor. Right, and keep doing that. Oh, he's here, okay.
This was from his last night.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to wait just a moment because we've got one council member that needs a return.
I don't see anyone. He's learned stage entrances from his brother. Okay, we are on our last public hearing item, a public hearing to consider the conditional zoning of property located at 511 Brevard Road from Highway Business District to Highway Business District Conditional Zone and Lodging Expansion Conditional Zone for the development of a 4-story hotel building and a future development parcel. You go, we'll present.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council, members of public. We are here with a request for a lodging, conditional zoning for a lodging expansion district. This property is on Brevard Road in West Asheville. It's very close to the farmer's market. It is at the intersection of Brevard Road and South Bear Creek Road, which curves and then goes into a neighborhood. This is highway business zoning, and behind this property is actually regional business zoning. There's a trailer, a mobile, excuse me, let me think about it. It's like a RV park, thank you. So it's almost like kind of, not exactly a campground, but an RV park where people are coming in and out. And then there's several businesses here along South Bear Creek before it transitions into a neighborhood. The overall site is 3.03 acres. And both South Bear Creek and Brevard Road are North Carolina DOT right-of-ways, so they're not city streets. The surrounding zoning here, just across South Bear Creek, is actually county zoning. It's not in the city's jurisdiction, and it's commercial services. And as I said before, to the west is regional business. So tonight's proposal is for a hotel. It's 106 rooms, and the proposal is to locate it against the I-40, and I should have said this is bordered by I-40. That's a pretty important thing. The hotel located near I-40. The proposal really is to divide this property into 2 parcels. So the lodging expansion conditional zone would be for this portion, and this out parcel would be highway business conditional zone. The reason staff requested this conditional zoning on the highway business section is so that we could make sure that we got a sidewalk along South Bear Creek Road, and we also requested no drive-throughs for that, any future development on the parcel, which they've agreed to. So. So the proposed hotel, as I said, is here near I-40. It has parking around on 3 sides. Usually in a more urban context, we would want no parking to be between the street and the hotel. This is a more suburban context, so that is a condition they are requesting. The fire department has required a second driveway, so that is what this driveway is, going out to South Bear Creek Road. The proposal includes sidewalks on all the street frontages. They have also agreed to build a transit shelter. There is a bus stop here on Brevard Road. They have also agreed to put in a pedestrian crossing signal across South Bear Creek Road. So, let's see, what else? Let me keep going. Sorry. So generally speaking, the proposal meets most of our lodging expansion district code. They're meeting the number of the percentage of openings on the ground floor. For the front facade, the code does say that, that side facades should be closer to what the front facade looks like. Planning and zoning pushed this point with them, and they added some windows on the side. Due to how hotels are programmed, sometimes it's difficult to add windows on the side facade. So they've added what they could to this proposal. This proposal was in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission on, August 1st, and they voted 6-1 in favor of the project. Like I said, they discussed the side facade of the building. There wasn't any public comment against the proposal. There was some concern by a neighbor for safety. South Bear Creek here is a somewhat curvy road, and sometimes people drive too fast, but that's kind of an existing condition regardless if there's any other development here or not. In recent zoning actions in the area, the most recent one was the Buncombe County Transfer Station, which the City Council rezoned last year, but otherwise there's not much that has happened in this general area. Staff generally feels that this is compatible. We're right next to a highway here. It's not impacting a neighborhood or any nearby businesses. We're not in the middle of a business core where we're impacting surrounding buildings either. I did include the B1 conditions, obviously, in your packet. A couple of them, just to make a note, that because NCDOT is in charge of the right-of-ways around this hotel, there are a couple of the conditions, if DOT does not approve those, we can't enforce them. So we've kind of put that language in so they don't have to come back to you all. What else? Generally, this is a suburban project, so it's not exactly really super close to stores and other things, but it is close to the farmer's market, Bent Creek. It's about 1.5 miles to Haywood Road, a couple miles to the outlets. So it's kind of within general vicinity of where visitors are coming to Asheville. And that concludes my report, unless you have any other questions for me.
Do you all have any questions from staff? We're going to hear from the applicant next.
I should have said, so for our future land use map and our new comprehensive plan, this is identified as an urban corridor area, and this use is a potential use in that area. So it does comply with that future land use map. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, staff, City Council persons. My name is Derek Allen. I am an attorney at Ward and Smith. I represent the applicant, Blackstream Development. Two principals from Blackstream are here this evening, Fort Elliott and Josh Howard. And then Chris Day rounds out our design team. He's from Civil Design Concepts and has drawn the wonderful drawings we've been looking at on the site plan. When we first had this in front of City Council a couple of weeks ago, it was clear there are a couple things that staff wants to go back and take a look at. We've implemented all those conditions. Staff has gone over those. I want to tell you a little bit about this project and this developer, Blackstream Developments from Greenville, South Carolina. They started out 3 years ago. 2 years ago, they put an office in downtown Asheville here in Pack Square, right beside French Broad Chocolates. Staff's been super receptive and helpful in us in getting through this, and they point out that it complies with the land use plan. And in looking at it from a land use professional, we all look at this property that you see here and kind of reach the conclusion, what else is going to go here? This thing is really an island within an island. If you look at this part here, you see that it's bounded by Bear Creek Road as well as Brevard Road, which is heavily trafficked, as well as Interstate 40. If you blow it out a little bit, which I've done with this particular aerial shot, you see that if you go further down, it's in between Interstate 26 as well. So it's really stuck in between the interstate exchanges there. It seems like it's perfect to get on and off and provide something that's different than your typical downtown type hotel or your airport hotel development. There were no issues at TRC, no issues at planning and zoning. It was a 6-1 vote. We originally included a long list of conditions, limits on height, limits on number of rooms, limits on parking spaces, sidewalk requirements, and we've since included the sidewalk requirements for the entirety of the property, a bus stop, open space, greenway easement, interconnectivity between the out parcel and the hotel parcel. And then we've added in that no drive-throughs will be there. We've added in shuttle service from the hotel to what we call reasonable locations, which would include downtown, would include the airport, include the retail area on the other end of Brevard Road down by the outlets. Outside of those conditions, we've made additional commitments. We've made commitments to provide a living wage. I met with Just Economics this afternoon to start that program. And we've also significantly committed to contribute at least $150,000 to the land trust that the city is establishing for land to bank for affordable housing. That commitment, our intention is to be triggered in the first calendar year following occupancy of the hotel and pay it in 6 annual installments of $25,000 each. That really is an acknowledgement of the fact that we do have an affordable housing issue, and folks have mentioned that for this parcel, and it just doesn't work there. It just doesn't work, and we've heard put your money where your mouth is, and so that's what we're doing. I would like to introduce Chris Day, who will go over some of the finer points of the project. Yes, ma'am.
Would you consider, or would the applicant consider amending the condition number 6 to include the
This is about the shuttle.
To include the retail space that you and I talked about? It just says, i.e. the airport and downtown.
Yes,
If you wouldn't
I'm fine
mind
if we
adding.
add in the example areas, the retail outlets.
Okay, because it's not in our presentation.
So we probably need to do a little wordsmithing while we're sitting here on item number 6 to add.
The retail, nearby retail locations.
Nearby retail locations.
It was the Asheville outlet area.
Or that's what we're talking about, right?
enough.
The Asheville outlets? Okay.
Yes.
Somebody's taking notes somewhere. Yes, okay. Several people.
Okay.
Maybe.
And we would propose that as an amended condition in case you guys need to take a vote on it. Thank you.
So we're on this 10-minute situation. Okay, tag team.
I'm going to be super fast.
Okay.
Mayor, members of council, my name is Chris Day with Civil Design Concepts. I'd like to thank Sasha and staff for all of their assistance to get us here tonight. As Derek pointed out, we are kind of in this island between Interstate 26 and I-40. Besides the fact that, as you go down South Bear Creek, this area we've got like a pest control place and the RV park. As you go down, you've got some topography challenges in this area as well. Once you cross underneath the interstate, I-26, 240, it really does get into a residential neighborhood, but a residential area. That area is kind of the threshold. While there's a few houses back on this side, most of this is business, and it's all zoned business. Some of this is county. It's zoned commercial service, which is similar to the highway business zoning, and then the rest of this area is zoned regional business, which is the same as the Asheville outlets. That being said, We made an effort here to orient the building and place it up against the interstate. For one, it helps to provide any type of shielding and buffering towards the uses as you leave. It also creates an out parcel here. That out parcel would remain highway business, but as Derek made reference, we are committing to restricting that to no drive-throughs. The other thing that the HBCZ does is it ensures that we provide whatever goes on this out parcel, that it provides pedestrian connectivity to the hotel use that is adjacent. The vehicular access there, the second access was a requirement of the fire marshal. While we have it shown in this specific location, as that out parcel gets developed, it would be our intention that it may adjust slightly to accommodate what retail or use went on that highway business tract. We are proposing to go ahead and put in the sidewalk along the out parcel tract, as well as sidewalks along Brevard Road, transit shelter on Brevard Road, as well as pedestrian signals for a crossing across South Bear Creek. Project is served by public water and sewer. Stormwater quantity and quality will be managed in accordance with the city's rules. And as Sasha made reference at our P&Z, they had requested additional fenestration on the Brevard Road side of the building, and those windows were added where feasible. So I'm available here for any questions, and the representative, Josh, will come up now.
Yeah,
What's your question?
I don't know whether this is for you or the applicant, I'm not really sure, but I know they haven't yet submitted a plan for the out parcel, but I guess I would encourage that to be as local as it can be. I mean, I'm assuming it's going to be some sort of food place maybe, but I just was curious what the plan is for the out parcel, and if there isn't a plan, hopefully it's local.
So I'll let them speak a little more. I'll know that.
So we've reached the 10 minutes on the presentation, and
I stopped when Vice Mayor Whistler asked a question.
did you pause it, or did we hit the time?
No, I just paused it.
Okay.
So
So we're still, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. All right. Do we want to tell the applicant how much time he has left?
3.5 minutes.
Okay.
3.5 minutes. Thank you very much.
We'll try to hold off on the questions till the end, then we can drag it out as long as we need to.
I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am. Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, and staff, good evening. I was introduced earlier. I'm Josh Howard. This is my business partner, Ford Elliott. We are both very happy to stand before you this evening. As Derek stated earlier, Blackstream is a proud member of Asheville business community at our Pack Square location. Blackstream is committed to Asheville, and that is why we are excited about this project. As a member of the community, we recognize that affordable housing is an important issue. While housing did not work for this site, we recognize the need and are committed to being good community stewards. That is why we are committing to contribute $150,000 to the Asheville Buncombe Land Trust. On behalf of our team, we thank you for your time, attention, and consideration of this project. We ask for your support and approval. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're here for any questions.
So just for clarification, there are a number of conditions that go along with this conditional zoning request, and some of the specific concerns were communicated to the applicant before tonight, because this is a conditional zoning, and we do need to make sure the applicant is aware of particular issues that council may have. And I understand that you have worked with staff to include conditions in this, to include the sidewalk piece around both parcels, to prohibit the outer parcel to be used for a drive-through of any sort in the future, to provide a shuttle service as described in the conditions. And I'm trying to remember if there was.
Land trust.
And then what you just said, which is the contribution to the land trust. Now, we've got someone here who can speak to the land trust. It is not a condition. The land trust is a separate, will be a separate nonprofit entity working in partnership with the city, among others. And this council has heard previously presentations about that. And the city actually has, I think, 2 staff that are on the board for the land trust. So what my understanding is of the commitment, the financial commitment to the land trust is that it would begin in the year 2020, or if for some reason the land trust takes longer to create, which it shouldn't, but if it did, a sum of $25,000 per year for a period of 6 years.
As Mr. Allen alluded to earlier, yes, we're committed to the land trust and starting to fund the land trust within the calendar year after occupancy. And so obviously as we see it, as soon as we can get going on this project, we will begin it as soon as we can. And obviously we will build it within the time allotted and certainly get it started certainly within the time allotted by the conditional zoning rules.
And I want to thank you for your willingness to do that. I do want to credit my council member here, Keith Young, and I think working with Shanika as well, came up with this creative concept to try to help us marry the challenges we're having around tourism and hotel growth with this continuing affordable housing crisis we're experiencing in Asheville. So, you know, we're trying to balance the interests of the community, and we're pleased to hear that you're willing to participate in this way.
We are happy to be great community members of Asheville.
Does anyone else have any questions of the applicant before I open the public hearing? No? Okay. All right. Thank you. At this time, I'll open the public hearing. If there's anyone wishing to comment on this item, please state your name and you'll have 3 minutes. Okay, I will close the public hearing. Do I have any other questions, comments, or a motion?
I have a question. I think this is really for Sasha. So there's a maybe it's one of the conditions is a pedestrian signal, crossing signal at South Bear Creek. Tell me, what is the value of that?
The transportation department requested that. So there's 2 transit stops in the area of this hotel. There's one if you are
so there's one on kind of on the property. Right?
Yeah, northbound and one southbound. So the southbound one is on the property. So let's say if you worked, if you used the bus and you were trying to leave here, it would at least get you closer in a safer way towards the other bus stop.
So we're going to put a pedestrian signal across a 2-lane road, but not across a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-lane road.
Right.
So can we do Bear Creek, but we can't do Brevard Road? That's
Well, it's either way, it's all NCDOT right of way, and that's why the condition's written is if DOT doesn't approve the crossing, we can't do it.
So
regardless.
So we don't know that they'll approve the Bear Creek crossing.
Correct.
Can we go ahead and ask them to do the crossing on Brevard to get to that bus stop?
Them being the applicant or them being DOT?
Well, DOT. It's going to be a DOT.
Yeah, I mean, I think the crossing at Bear Creek is, I mean, far be it from me to ever say no or indict any pedestrian improvements, but it is a little useless if you also don't have the crossing on Brevard Road, which is what you would really need to get to that bus stop.
Right.
So yes, let's just include that in their ask and ask if they would, if they DOT.
Do you look confused? Are you following the?
I am. I think the question's for the applicant whether or not they agree to that.
Well, we're asking staff to ask DOT for the crossing.
Oh,
to ask DOT for the crossing on Brevard Road.
I don't know if does the applicant play a role in that?
Yeah,
got it.
All right. No, I wouldn't think so. Although they have this odd parcel which goes on the other side. So to the extent that the applicant would need to give any right of way on the other side of Bear Creek, maybe we would ask that they.
I don't believe they have any property.
According to the document on our attachment, it looks like their parcel actually.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Yeah. See how
it is strange.
Well, it's probably an old parcel or something.
Yeah.
But see how it.
I agree.
They may need to provide some right of way in order to put a crossing. I'm looking at Derek. Is that something that anyone would object to if we wanted to ask DOT to put the crossing across Brevard?
I mean, it'd be great if it.
Yeah, to the extent we need to provide right of way for a crossing across that's fine. We're not sure if it goes across or not. I guess we'll find out as we get to closing.
Okay, so to the extent there's any land needed on the what is that, the northwest corner of the intersection of Bear Creek and Brevard Road for the purposes of creating a pedestrian crossing. The applicant is willing to provide an easement.
That's right. Correct.
Maggie, did you, let's, when we do the final, this will come, if this is approved, it will come back on our consent agenda with the final conditions. No? Doesn't it come through? Oh, that's only for Commissioner Shark. I'm sorry. You'll fix it for the one I signed. Yeah, yes, thank you.
Thanks. And I don't have any other questions. I just, I've had several conversations with Derek about this, and I appreciate all of the sort of community benefits that the applicant is willing to provide as a part of this project. I think that's great. I think that's, it's become, it's what has to happen when you build a hotel in this town today. I am, as Derek knows, I am not going to support this project. As I discussed with him, I really think this is a place where we really need multifamily. I understand the applicant builds a lot of multifamily. I understand you ran the numbers and it doesn't work here. Perhaps my greatest academic failing is that I never took economics. So when people say to me, we can't get the numbers work, I got nothing. I got nothing to say. I never took economics. I know it's astonishing. But here's what I do know is that there is some relationship between the market and demand. And until we start demanding multifamily housing in more places, we're probably not going to have the market.
Yeah, that's clearly you didn't take economics.
See, like, I didn't do economics. This is what I don't know.
You are demanding it.
Right. So anyway, we still need housing, and I've had two different groups of people come to me in the last month saying the numbers don't work to do X, and yet X is what this community needs, and so I'm going to be a no. So I'm sorry.
And I would just add to that. I mean, I struggle with the fact that we've got 6 hotels in the pipeline. This being one of them that I know of. There may be more that I don't know of. And I mean, I even see some future applicants sitting in the audience. And I myself have personally toyed with whether or not we should consider a moratorium on hotels for the city, period. But realistically, legally, moratoriums are very difficult in North Carolina. If you can get them passed, they're extremely temporary. But I do, so that's not necessarily the answer. We are, as a council, probably going to be able to put together a work session that we can dedicate just to this topic and really look at all of the pieces of tourism that impact our community, and especially as a city, how we're able to finance the needed infrastructure improvements to be able to continue to host as many people that are coming to this city, while balancing the level of growth we're seeing with preserving what makes our community wonderful, and also so that the people that live here can afford to live here and stay here. We've got a lot of different things happening. And I do think it's important that people understand, and applicants that are coming forward with hotels understand, that we're going to have to consider each one of these applications individually. We're going to have to look at them very carefully. We're really going to need to understand how the particular project is going to contribute to our city. And I think in this situation, the applicant has worked hard to figure out a way to meet some of the issues that we're having, especially around housing. So I'll leave you with this final note. I think there's a tendency, especially in the hotel industry, to think, well, we're building these hotels, we're going to generate this property tax revenue, we create jobs and so on and so forth. And we've actually been able to do kind of a little bit of a deep dive on the revenue side, just to look at this one piece of it, which is not, you got to look at the whole picture. But this city collects around $64 million in property tax revenue every year, and it's the majority revenue source that balances our budget. And of that, hotels contribute $3.25 million. And I think in their mind, it's a lot bigger number. but it's not. And what that means is the taxpayers are subsidizing the infrastructure improvements needed to help maintain a city that hosts that many people that come to it every day. That's what that means. Now, there is certainly an argument to be made about the economics around the hotel industry and the tourism industry that have helped keep this city strong for as many years as it has been, and that, I understand that, and that's valid. But when you sit in this seat and you look at how much it costs to fix sidewalks and to pave roads and to keep a community safe, firefighters, so on and so forth, and try to provide a forum that creates good quality jobs for the people that live here, you know, every day we struggle with it, every day. I mean, it's the one thing could keep me up at night. So, I just want to send that message loud and clear that we're really struggling, and we need folks that come to us that want to participate in our community, want to invest in our community, that we need to see that partnership piece of it, or we're not going to have a workable situation. Sorry, that was long. I'm sorry, I exceeded my 3 minutes. Brandon, did you have a comment?
Well, I just want to say that I'm going to vote with Julie on this, and that I would like for developers and investors in the city, and you've just spoke to this, Mayor, but to realize that what we're really looking for, you know, what we want housing, and we want businesses that are going to add some diversity to our economy, not just aimed towards tourism. But that's all I got to say.
Anyone else? Okay. We don't yet have a motion if anyone wants to make one.
I'll make a motion. Make a motion. I move to approve the conditional zoning request for Highway Business District Lodging Expansion Conditional Zone for the Mainstay Suites Hotel at 511 Brevard Road with the requested conditions, and find that the request is reasonable, is in the public interest, and is consistent with the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan, and that number 1, the project is located in a well-established commercial area. Number 2, increases pedestrian connectivity. And number 3, a new shelter will be built at the existing art stop on Brevard Road.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. I have a motion and a second. Before we vote, I did also want to thank, I know we have in the audience David Bartholomew, who is one of the folks knowledgeable about the land trust. So we asked you to be here tonight. Thank you very much, in case there were any questions about that. Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so we'll do a hand vote for Maggie. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, and any opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, folks. That is the last item on our public hearing agenda, and I'm going to turn it over to the Vice Mayor to do the boards and commissions.
Great. So the Boards and Commissions Committee wants to re-advertise for the Citizen Police Advisory Committee, the Civil Service Board, the Neighborhood Advisory Committee, and the Public Arts and Cultural Commission, primarily because we didn't have applicants, but in one case, the Public Art and Cultural Commission wanted us to re-advertise to potentially look at some more diversity on that commission. I don't think I need it.
I'm sorry, did you want to re-advertise for the Civil Service Board?
No, I didn't say Civil Service Board.
She's
Did
on
I?
Public Arts and Cultural
I didn't mean
Commission.
to. And the Boards and Commissions Committee recommends for the Civil Service Board open position Carter Webb. So that's a motion.
Second.
Brian seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Oh, okay, all right. All right, so I have a couple of people signed up to speak, but I think the first one wanted to speak on Vision Zero. I think it's this was already, yes, Dearmore, okay, already. The second one is Kira, John? Jan? Okay, come on. Yes, are you Kira? You can have 3 minutes and.
Okay, good evening. My name is Kira, and I'm here to express some concern about the Reed Creek Greenway, the kudzu that's growing there, and to propose goats as a solution. I don't know how to use this.
You can just take that, yeah, take those. Will you hand
You
them
can
to-
just put it right on top.
Or, yeah.
Sorry, I've never used one of these.
No,
before.
turn it, turn it, there you go.
Yeah, I took a bunch of pictures.
Don't
You
just
can kind of
look.
see what we're looking at here is
Yep.
pretty atrocious.
Where is this again?
Reed Creek
It's the Reed Creek
Greenway.
Greenway
Oh,
kudzu.
I mean, pictures tell more than 1,000 words, and there you go. There's 1,000 words for you. But really, it doesn't have to be that dire. Anyway, so in the last couple years, I've watched with concern as kudzu has threatened more and more of the greenway. I understand that on an annual basis, local NGOs take a cleanup day, one cleanup day, to try to check the growth of this invasive. Despite these efforts, one day of work every year or two is clearly insufficient to thwart this invasive, which has already destroyed 3 million acres of land in its southeast and is now found everywhere throughout Asheville. I'm particularly concerned about kudzu in our public green spaces. As Asheville continues to grow while our urban canopy shrinks, it's especially important to protect and maintain our parks. Kudzu represents one of the greatest threats to our parks and green spaces. It kills everything in its path. It destroys habitats, strangles trees, and leaves in its wake what you see in the pictures that I've been showing you. We are not the only people concerned about this noxious invasive. Other cities have begun using a novel means to address it, livestock grazing. In other words, goats. Each goat can eat up to 25 pounds a day with no negative environmental impact. Unlike toxic chemicals, which would pollute the creek and poison the soil, goats actually benefit the treated area. Not only are goats eco-friendly, they're also cost-effective. In the end, I think the issue is best framed by evaluating the true cost of the three alternatives. First, to continue laissez-faire management. Secondly, to begin treating the area with toxic chemicals. Or third, to eradicate kudzu with persistent management through livestock grazing. With the first option, it seems likely that within the next few years, the entire greenway will be covered with kudzu, and many of its trees and undergrowth dead or dying. With the second option, our waterways are poisoned.
If you have written comments, you can just hand them to Maggie and she'll pass them around.
You can't read my writing.
And I'm wondering if the real place to start would be with the Parks and Rec Board, because this is their jurisdiction, to see whether they've looked at that, because sometimes somebody's
you guys
already.
have a contract with goat herds or something.
Yep.
And
We've used goats before.
And I've spoken to the tree commission. There's a lot of support when I go to the public and talk about it. Everybody's supportive. It's forward thinking. It's cost effective.
So maybe Maggie, you can get her some information about Parks and Rec Board, and you could touch base with Kathy Ball, our city manager, and kind of find out what the status of that is and whether anyone's looked at that already.
Great. I mean,
Thanks.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
25 pounds a day, huh?
Thank you so much.
Next person I have to signed up to speak is Sydney Bach.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I understand that you will have an upcoming meeting soon with the Mission Healthcare System and Hospital Corporation of America. And I just wanted to give you all a heads up as to something that I have come across, and that is if you are anticipating a windfall profit, or not profit, a windfall in tax revenues, it will probably be NSF, not so fast. and I'm going to ask Maggie to make copies and give this to you. These are news articles as to what happened in Silva when its nonprofit hospital was purchased by a major hospital private corporation. The town of Silver anticipated a windfall income in tax revenues, but what happened is immediately after the asset sale occurred, the hospital corporation, the private corporation, went to court and challenged the assessment and got it reduced 70%. So what happened is that there was a large tax rate increase for the citizens of Silver. When you go to this meeting, I implore you to get this straight up cleared with the members of the Hospital Corporation of America, have it reduced to writing that they will not seek to challenge the assessment of the properties that they will be acquiring here, which I understand is the largest amount of taxable property by one entity in the entire county. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. Your budget is already in dire circumstances, and if you're counting on this as additional income, be very careful that you're not led down the rosy path and that a major national corporation, which has bean counters and lots of expensive attorneys, are going to challenge the tax assessment. And by the way, while it's challenged, no taxes are paid. While the matter is in litigation, the taxpayer has no obligation. That's what happened in Silver. Didn't get a dime while the matter was pending. And there's, as we all know, the original case, appeals and appeals. So just beware. It ain't necessarily so until it happens. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the folks I have signed up to speak. If there's anyone else wishing to speak on an item that was not on the agenda, you can do that. Joe, not on the agenda. Maggie, you got to reset that clock. It's going to go.
Before I start, I just want to make sure that the file that I left you all, that's part of the record, the full file.
He's not.
Sure, yep, yeah, all 260 slides. I can't talk that fast in 10 minutes. As you all know, I work around the planet. I was actually talking with, we're doing a partnership in Australia last night, and I work with governments, and I consult governments, and I help governments with leadership, making economic decisions, and moving their communities forward. I'm deeply disappointed in my own community. I'm sad about how we operate and how we continually take the low road when we try to solve problems, and we're not progressing our community forward. I work with communities that would kill to have our problems, and yet somehow we always snatch defeat from victory. You know, I was talking with Kathy about this. There's a sense in a culture of winning inside government at the cost of other people. And it's not a culture of promoting our community forward and solving problems. And we create mountains out of molehills, all to lose other opportunities. You all put me on the I-26 Aesthetics Committee. We have 16 months to make decisions. I was put on in June, and we just had our first meeting last month, and it wasn't technically our real first meeting because our first meeting really is going to be in November. 16 months to give our input on enhancing the quality of our community. That's not going to happen. We're not going to be able to bring items forward because it's already too late. You know, we had an opportunity to deal with this years ago when I helped create the I-26 Aesthetics Committee, or the Asheville Design Center, and we've lost that opportunity to enhance our community. All of this stuff just slips through our fingers. And yet we see these opportunities when a citizen brings forward a solution, and we choose to not take those things, both with me as a volunteer and what we witnessed tonight. You know, this is something that just disturbs me beyond all compare. And it disheartens me because I have faith in government. I work with governments. I try to help governments. And I see my own community melt away in front of me. I'm just disappointed. You're looking at somebody that's lost faith, has his heart broken, and has witnessed an unbelievably low level of decision making. This is not leadership. This is not courage. This is not doing the right thing. This is not who we are. We continually aim for the bottom. And good luck with the solutions. I look forward to the notice of violation delivered to Green Life tomorrow. Thanks.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Mike, did you have your hand up?
Well, I did, but on the agenda.
Oh. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Wainscott. It kind of feels like Monday after this nice long weekend that we had. Really busy, lots of people visiting here. It was Indigenous Peoples Day here in Asheville. 2 years ago, City Council made this proclamation declaring Columbus Day to be Indigenous Peoples Day because we need to recognize that the prosperity that we have here in North America came at the expense of displacing the established brown people that were here before us. And that's happening again here in Asheville, not with the Native American population, the African American population. As Barbara Whitehorn pointed out again a few weeks ago, the African American population has fallen from 17% to 12% in less than a generation, from the year 2000 to 2017. And Barbara Whitehorn also pointed out that it has to do with the big influx of white people into the area, pushing out all the brown people. But we did a great job coming up with a proclamation to observe Indigenous Peoples Day. You have the power of proclamations to bring attention to a matter. The hotel tax is creating, unwittingly, ethnic cleansing here in Asheville by attracting affluent people who are mostly white. I don't think black people have the problem with too much affluence. I haven't heard that. So principles are important, but practicality matters as well. When is anybody going to have the courage to stand up to the lack of morality around our hotel tax and how it gets used? $3 million, hotels give us $3 million in property taxes, and we get $20 million in the hotel tax, and you say that you can't do anything about it. That's like watching somebody drown and saying, I can't do anything about it because I don't have I'm not a certified lifeguard. You can take a stand, you can boycott things, you boycott meat, and we had Vegan Awareness Week. Vegan Awareness Week versus Indigenous Peoples Day, but I know that you don't care more about cows than you do the African American community, but we're just sitting here watching the TDA, which is 100% white people, represented by Julie Mayfield, who's a white woman on a board of nothing but white people, to spend $20 million. There's one person of color on the board, one person of color on the board. That's it. You could quit and let Shanika be there, and then there would be an African American on the board, Julie. You could do that.
I'm not sure she wants to do
I'm sure she doesn't want to do it.
No, I'm not sure she wants.
I don't think any of you should. I think you should all boycott it and let the agency such as it is go defunct. Not appoint any more members. Do something about it. You can do something. You can make proclamations. You can have referendums. You can appoint panels. Do something, please.
Anyone else wishing to speak on an item not already on the agenda? Or on the agenda? Okay, we've got a closed session motion, I believe.
Move the Asheville City Council go into closed session for the following reasons: to prevent disclosure of information that is privileged and confidential pursuant to the laws of North Carolina and not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes. The law that makes information privileged and confidential is North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318 10A3. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318 11A1. To consult with an attorney employed by the city about matters with respect to which the attorney-client privilege between the city and its attorney must be preserved, including but not limited to a lawsuit involving the following parties: James Robert West versus City of Asheville. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318 11A3. To consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, or conditions of appointment of an individual public officer or employee, the statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318 11A6, and to prevent the disclosure of information that is confidential pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 160A through 168, the Personnel Privacy Act. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318, 11A1.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll adjourn from the closed session.